this is the Triumph Rocket 3R, and at long last we've got our hands on it and we're going to give you a full honest review.
So this bike has a 2458cc 3-cylinder engine, and it's the most torquiest, that word?
Not really, but it is now.
The most torquey production motorcycle in the world.
Come on, put your back into it. It's not heavy, is it?
Just a bit.
Now this engine produces 165 brake horsepower, which is incredible, which is 167 PS or 123 kilowatts aeroplane. Uh, 123 kilowatts at 6,000 RPM, but it's the torque that is the incredible thing about this bike. It's the most torquey motorcycle in the world, as Darcy just said. 221 Newton meters of torque at 4,000 RPM. That's 163.1 pounds-foot of torque.
As with most bikes, the bike's sort of set up for the average height, which is about 5'10". This is no exception, but obviously if you're a bit bigger, a bit smaller, you'll still be fine on it, but that is probably the mid-range of the height that it's calibrated for.
Now, what does that torque and that power feel like? It's so torquey that moving and changing speed is just effortless. So obviously overtaking is just a twist of the wrist. Hills become non-existent, and it's got a tidal wave of torque behind you. But the way they've done the mapping, it doesn't come in too hard on you. So if you're careful with the throttle, it's perfectly easy to ride. But if you really want it to go, and you've got it in the correct mode, which we'll come on to, it flies. And you could be reaching crazy speeds in no time whatsoever. It's designed and sort of marketed as a muscle bike, as a cruiser, but it feels much more like a sports bike, with the rake and the trail geometry, which I'll tell you in a second. It handles much more like a sports bike than a cruiser.
So this bike is shaft driven, which is quite unusual for a bike. It's got a 6-speed gearbox, and it's got quite really good brakes, for as you'd expect for what it is. It's got 320mm Brembo double discs at the front and 300mm at the rear single disc, and they really do give you some good stopping power.
Now this video is going to be much more about how the bike rides and handles than it is about all the specs, but we will give you the specs at the end, and we're going to give you the pertinent details and specs as we go along. But this has 4 modes: rain, for obvious reasons, road and sport, and a rider configurable mode. You can feel the difference in the modes. Obviously sport is very responsive, road is not as responsive, but it will give you full throttle if you open it fully. There's pros and cons to modes, as we've said before, because if you get used to riding in one particular mode and you get at one with the bike, and then you change modes, say you're getting used to riding in rain for instance, and you suddenly go into sport, the bike becomes a different animal, so it can catch you out, and that is the negative side of modes, which we have also found in cars with the Porsche 911 in the past. You get used to the normal mode and put it in sport, and suddenly you're like, Christ, you know, it's a different animal. So that's the negative of it, but otherwise it obviously changes it depending on the road conditions you're riding in, so it's a good thing in that respect.
This bike's got a seat height of 773mm, is that right?
Yep.
And from the offset it looks like a massive bike, but when you're sitting on it and you're riding it, this riding position is not much difference to that of an Iron 883. Obviously it's a bigger bike than that, but riding position wise it doesn't feel any bigger when you're actually on it.
The wheelbase on this is 1,677mm, which is about that much longer than the Heritage Classic Harley Davidson, which is my personal bike. Although, as Darcy said, it doesn't feel long because of the seating position. The rake is 27.9 degrees and the trail is 134.9 millimeters. Now, I know there's a review out there from one of the bigger motorcycle channels that said the rake is 34 degrees, and a lot of people think that is the true rake. But if you look on the Triumph website, we are correct and we have researched it. And the rake being quite steep, sports bike-like-ish almost, means that the handling is more twitchy than you might expect on a muscle bike or a cruiser. As I said, it feels more like a sports bike to ride, and personally I would prefer a sort of 30 to 34 degree rake on a bike like this, because it would be more stable, and you know, with that kind of speed that it can produce and all that torque, you'd be better off with those sort of dimensions. But if you know, you're a sports bike rider and you come to this, you'd find it absolutely fine. If you're a cruiser rider and you come to this, then you'd find it twitchy.
As with all of our videos, we can never avoid background noise. A train has decided to stop right next to us, and we're right next to an airport, and it's a bit windy. We have got a dead cat on the mic, but that doesn't do everything.
Oh, car coming.
And there's a car. Great. So this bike weighs 291 kilos, which doesn't feel too heavy when you're riding it, but as you can see, it's quite heavy when you're pushing it along. But compared to most of the Harley Davidson Softail range, it's lighter than that. The Heritage Classic being an example, that's 316 kilos, so it's 20 odd kilos lighter than that, so it's not too heavy for what it is.
Now, one thing we've noticed, we've been stopped here for 15-20 minutes now. The engine still feels like I'm sitting on an oven, so it does get ever so hot. And also, talking about the engine, it's not particularly wide for such a huge capacity. The tank's actually slightly wider at the top than the engine, so it's a more narrow bike than you'd imagine for the size that it is.
So this bike does 0 to 60 in 2.73 seconds, which is absolutely incredible, and that is supercar performance out of something that's a bike that's, you know, very small fraction of the price. And to put a comparison, that's just as fast as a Lamborghini Aventador, so that is very quick.
Now, the ride on this is very nice, it's very comfortable. The suspension soaks up the bumps very nicely indeed, and we're on the fens today and it's very, very bumpy, and I haven't had any problems with that whatsoever. So, you know, you can get on this bike and enjoy just riding normally, but with all that torque and all that power, you're always holding back because there's so much there. It's a question of whether you want to unleash it or not. So if you weren't the sort of rider who wanted to exploit all that power and torque, it wouldn't be the bike for you. But if you're an experienced rider and you want to have the most torquey bike in the world, wow, what a bike to have.
This bike's got an 18 litre fuel tank, and it does 6.82 litres per 100 kilometres, or 41.45 miles per gallon, which is really good considering how much performance it gives out. And to put that in perspective again, my car is a 1.2 litre Corsa, and that does 0 to 60 in about 9 minutes, and that does the same miles per gallon. So which one would you go for? This, obviously. So the range that you'll get out of that full tank is 164 miles.
So, looks wise, is this the bike for you? It's very modern styled, very striking, and when you first see it in the metal in front of you, it's like, wow, look at this bike, it's amazing. You've got the sort of shaft drive and everything to the one side here, which we'll film in a second, but which means the wheels open at the back here, and these pipes are very short, ending there, and they make a nice sound, and when you decelerate it pops and bangs a little bit, so it's got an interesting note to it.
So the Avon Cobra tyres were made specifically for this bike, and you've got a 240mm wide rear tyre, and that looks really menacing from behind. That looks really cool. And from the back of the bike, if you just look at the back little quarter, it's similar in styling to a Harley Davidson Fat Bob.
Now riding along, obviously there's no wind protection whatsoever, which is fine because that's the sort of bike it is, but with all that power and torque and the speed you can go, I think it would be better with some wind protection and a fairing. And obviously there is another version of this, the GT, which does have some sort of wind protection, but you could take that a step further and have a proper fairing, and maybe that would make the bike even nicer because you could get out of the wind and really exploit that power and torque.
The mirrors on this bike are very good. They're bar end mirrors, which I think are much better than the normal mirrors which come out here, and then you get, like, you know, it sticks out another half a foot, which is much better, and you get a much better visibility of the road behind, and you only get a little bit of your shoulder in the back, whereas ones of them here you get sort of 3/4 of your shoulder and a tiny little bit of the road behind you, so this is a much better way to go.
Now, if you do happen to have a friend and they want to lift on the back, there is actually a very nicely styled hidden foot peg here, and it folds out like that and you can sit on the back, obviously. The stand on this, while I'm talking about it, it doesn't lean much onto the stand, so it feels like it easily could go back the other way and tip over, so be careful of that. If you are on the back, I would say it's fine for a short journey down to the shops or something, but I wouldn't feel very comfortable sitting here for a long distance, and if someone accelerated with all that torque, you might find yourself sitting on the rear wheel and ruining your smallest body part. Now interestingly, when you do rev it, it does this little shift to the left like that, which is the same as the BMW R18 which we reviewed about a week ago, and that was the same sort of thing, and so I don't quite know why it does that, but it does, so it's just one of those little things.
Don't forget to check out our t-shirts. We've got loads of designs online. They'll be displayed in the carousel below, but there's more on the website, so don't forget to click it. There's stuff related to the channel and bike related stuff as well. Make sure you leave a like on the video, tell us what you think about the Rocket 3 in the comments below, and subscribe for more.
So, our verdict on the Triumph Rocket 3. It's a lovely bike, it's extremely powerful, extremely torquey, and it's very exhilarating to ride. So if you're after something that can pretty much beat anything on the planet, then buy this motorbike. If you want just a sort of cruiser bike to potter around on, it's going to be too much of a handful, to be honest. So you need to be the right sort of person. I'd say you need to have a bit of riding skill before you get on this, although you could ride it with sort of less experience. Say you put it into rain mode, it would be less powerful, etc. But it could be a handful. It's a bike you've got to be careful with, you've got to treat it with respect because it is the most torquey bike on the planet. So if you've got the skill, it's a wonderful bike to have if you like the sort of modern styling and everything. Go for it.